respect that.
Well, just like free range. You can have 2 chickens running around in front of a barn packed full of chickens, and they'll say that it's free range. I mean, the labels on our food, it's really hard because I know most people are trying to be conscious of it at some point. I mean, if you're going through a drive-through somewhere, which I did one day, not very long ago. I needed a Coke, okay? And so I went through a drive-through, and it said, I mean, this is like, and I felt horrible buying a soda in the first place, but buying one from fast food. So I'm like in the drive-through, and then I look and it says, Braille menus available. And I'm like, who's in your drive-through that needs a Braille menu? You know, I'm like, okay, this is how conscientious people are. They're just driving through and getting cheap food that they have no idea if it's recycled from paper towels or what. I mean, it's just not. So I think most people try to be really conscientious. And so when you go in, I can't pronounce half the things on labels. So I try, you know, if I can't say what it is, try not to buy it. But, you know, like you're saying, all natural. What does that mean? It exists on this planet. It's naturalized to the continent now. I mean, it doesn't have any meaning. How can people know what they're getting? Like when they're buying your...
What consumers have to do is become more knowledgeable, and many of them don't want to. I think what it comes down to is in the 50s and 60s, there was a concerted effort throughout the country to go to a national food system and treat everything as a commodity and subsidize it and bring it down to the lowest common denominator and make it as cheap as possible. And back in those days, there was never any effort to do any kind of antitrust policing about that because it was seen as a good thing. In those days, fuel was cheap, and it seems to me that one problem with the organic labels now is that they still are national. I think it needs to be local, and people need to at least have a nodding acquaintance with the cow that might give them their milk, because, you know, like organic, for example, if you're in the lower 48 and you're driving down the road and there's a really cool little farm and it says organic, it probably is. I would bet it is. But if you're in Safeway and you're buying Horizon or the Big O, there's many a slip, let's say, because in the beginning, the worst thing is that just to get up here, all organic products, milk products, are ultra high temperature pasteurized, which means they're a dead product. They can only sell that milk in a cooler because nobody would buy it if they didn't. But really, they could just go buy it, you know, like those little things called real milk.
Mm-hmm.
All those UHT milks could really be out in the shelves.
But nobody would buy it.
But nobody would buy it because A, it would taste gross, B, they would have to acknowledge that it's a dead product. And then what River was talking about, with different standards that get co-opted by very large companies, that's what's happened. You know, like for example, organic milk is supposed to be produced by cows that used to say on pasture.
Right.
Well, now it says have access to pasture.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Right, so it's like, if I could get my cow ass out of this barn, I could be in that pasture down the road.
Right.
Nice.
We've got a fence.
Right.
And free range is like you said, you know.
I could turn around in the stall.
It could be a big cage instead of what people assume. They picture in their mind that you know, there's a bunch of chickens outside and they're eating bugs that naturally occur and they're in great shape, but you know.
That's just not quite the case. We've got to run to a break. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes with more Up North. All right. Welcome back. Stop it. You're making me, you know, feel too good. Karen Olson is here on our panel, Patricia O'Neill, and River Bean, the perfect name for being a farmer. And I was getting these great images of, like, you know, do you remember The Far Side with the boneless chicken farm and all these chickens just like laying around on the ground? And it was like, I'm still frustrated with the labeling. And you know, Karen, you had brought up like that, how this huge farming started in the 50s and 60s. And I think part of that was reaction to the war, to the Depression, to people not having money or access, and also to be able to subsidize farms so that they stayed in existence, though sadly that didn't happen the same way. So I think that's part of it. I want to talk a little bit, and maybe we can start with you, Patricia, because I know you'll have an opinion on this, River. Seeds that are coming in, that people are growing. I know a lot of people that do like seed swaps, heirloom seed swaps, to make sure that they're Alaska friendly. You know, because you can look at the seed catalogs, and I love them. I do. And I like, oh God, that tomato just sounds like a really good one, and this one sounds like this, and they're great to look at, but they can come here and be like, not working out for you. So can you talk a little bit about the seeds that are that, and compared to, like, say, the Monsanto seeds or the other seeds that come in that don't make more later?
Quite honestly, I am not well versed in that. I heard some producers and someone that actually used to work at a seed company talking at the SARE conference a couple weeks ago, and what I did learn was that it takes a lot of land to grow good seed, to keep it pure and to keep it safe, because you have to separate seeds in different areas so they don't cross-contaminate. I didn't know that. So there's a lot that goes into growing seeds. I know that our producers in Alaska are very concerned about seeds right now, about the supply of seeds, where they're coming from, if they're a good source. I've heard producers mention GMO seeds and being very uncomfortable with a seed being patented. So I know that our producers have a lot of concern about it, and I heard it repeatedly at the SARE conference. So I know that it is up and coming, and people are, you know, very aware of what seeds they are buying, trying to get it from sources that are reputable and are, you know, good, pure sources, and that aren't either genetically modified or, you know, if they feel strongly about Monsanto, you know, not buying it from those sources.
Well, I mean, I think at this point the planet is under more threat from Monsanto than it is terrorism. I really do. I think that they are altering our food supply to such a degree that, I mean, this is just my personal belief. And if you don't believe me, Google it, because it's out there. The things that they're doing to change nature. I mean, hey, if you don't think God made junk, why are you letting them screw around with your seeds? I mean, it's that severe. River, what's your take on the seed situation? Because I understand you do some things with plants and such.
Right. Oh yes, it is. The seeds are getting more scarce because companies like Monsanto, especially, are buying up seed companies. But what we try to do to get our seeds is get it as far north as possible, so that, and generally we order most of our seeds from Maine because it's the closest environment that we can get to Alaska. So. There are some seed companies that are in the south, the seeds just won't grow up here. They just don't come close to our environment or to our climate. And so we get our seeds as close to the Alaskan environment as possible.
So what about the GMO seeds?
I've heard that it is in Alaska, unfortunately, and some people are using it, unfortunately.
And the problem with that is the cross-contamination.
Absolutely.
Because it can, if you have an organic farm, a certified organic farm, next to a other farm that's using these genetically modified seeds, they will cross-contaminate. And Monsanto has actually gone in and said, hey, you're now growing our stuff because we've got a patent on this.
Right.
And taken over.
Intellectual property. Right.
Yeah, as though you ripped it off because some bee went over and
Right.
smelled both flowers. I mean, it's just, it's really staggering.
I think even another problem is the health concern of not only the environment but the people. There's never been any testing on GMO food, and for people to consume it without even knowing it. And so we get back to labeling again. It's not labeled in this country that it contains GMO product.
Well, I know that there was an offer of a bunch of GMO corn to one of the African countries. because they were having starvation problems. And they were afraid that the people would take that corn and plant it. So they said no. They were in that big of a position, or that took that big of a position on it, that it was like, no, we can't afford that on so many levels. I mean, what if cows were as genetically modified as our vegetables are right now? I mean, what would they look like? Any ideas? Because you'd want a huge udder like this big, and their legs don't really need to be that long.
Right.
You can just roll around on it like a yoga ball.
Well, cows really